speaking of spacing, we talked a lot about spacing in the Knicks lineup. We have some spacing to talk about in a different construct. The Houston Rockets is the team that we want to talk about this week. The red hot Houston Rockets, I need to respect them and add that to them. We got to start with the obvious. Let's not bury the lead. Let's dive straight in. The Rockets lose one of their best players, maybe their best player, Alperen Sengun, out as of March 12th. You pointed this out to me first. Actually, Geoff, Ime Udoka does something really cool. It goes with Jabari Smith Jr. at the 5. 20 years old, his second season in the league. A good shooter this year, shooting 36% from 3 on decent volume. A good rebounder, a decent rim protector, not good, decent. He's 20 years old again. So now your starting lineup is Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Dillon Brooks, and Jabari Smith Jr. All good shooters besides Amen Thompson, who is obviously one of the worst shooters in the league, but also really none of those guys are like great shooters. We often joke about how we've never seen Fred VanVleet make a 3-point shot, but somehow he's shooting 39% from 3.
There's no way he's shooting 39%. I watched last night's game. He was 4 for 16. Like, I don't get it. When are these threes going in? I watch a lot of basketball. I don't get it.
Yeah,
it's insane.
It's not just, and to be clear, if any Rockets fans are watching this, it's not just in Houston. It's throughout his career, like primarily with Toronto. I've also felt like, how does he end the season at 38, 39, 40%, 41%? Like, how does he? I don't see it. Like, anyway, it must be a bias.
It must be a bias because his arc is so high. They just, like, to me, that stands out. Like, it's like, how can this go in? Also, I just want to laugh about it again. And Rockets fans, you're listening. We're about to talk really good about the Rockets, so I'm sorry. Dude, he's shooting 43.6% at the rim. How is that possible? How did he?
43.6%. Oh man, it was down. Remember, it was in the 30s. It was in like the high 30s early in the season. He's come on of late.
He's getting hot. That's such a conundrum to me. It's like the TJ McConnell thing. Like, I was watching the Clippers Pacers game last night. TJ McConnell is the strangest basketball player to me I've ever seen.
Because he attempted a mid-range jump shot.
He attempted a 3, XJ, and he couldn't get it to the rim.
No, he can't make threes.
How is
his mid range is cash money. He doesn't miss.
Okay, so go crush the YMCA, dude. Like, how is this happening? I don't understand. But he was so good. He was so good. He was like, it was like they were like, okay, he's not going to shoot threes. We're going to give him a head of steam. He gets the head of steam and he creates a good shot for his team every single time down. And it's like, how is there
an approximation of what Tyrese Halliburton does for that? It's like weird. He just does like he's like if Isaiah Hartenstein was backing up Nikola Jokic. Like, yeah,
that's such a perfect explanation. Yeah, analogy. That's such a perfect analogy because it's like they're still getting the really good shots that Halliburton creates. They're just different. It's in a different way.
Yeah,
and in a weird way, I know we're not talking about the Pacers this week. But like, because of the volatility of Halliburton and how reliant on 3-point shooting he is, if I was a Pacers fan and the game was like close down the stretch, I would like,
you want like, TJ?
I want McConnell to run the offense, dude. Get me Iguodala, like get me.
I want Iguodala. That's funny. I love that.
Yeah,
that's a
back to the Rockets. The Rockets are awesome. Keep
back to the Rockets. Let me just finish kind of introing it. Yeah, so that lineup, who'd I say? VanVleet, Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr. So theoretically, that should be a strong spacing lineup. There's basically only one player you can leave open. And the difference is, on most teams, this player that you can kind of leave open if they're on the perimeter is the center. But in this case, on the Rockets, it's their wing. So this gives you the very strange but amazing opportunity to plant Amen Thompson, one of literally the most athletic human beings in the world, in basketball or otherwise. You can plant him in the dunker spot and allow him to kind of take advantage of the space rather than contributing to reducing it. So this is like an amazing case study, especially from our standpoint in evaluating this and just, just to put some data to it. We might expect this difference in spacing to kind of like help mitigate the loss of one of their best offensive players, probably the best offensive player in Sengun. But what we've seen so far in the 5-man unit that I mentioned, very small sample, 150 possessions. They have an offensive effectiveness of 138 points per 100 possessions with a net rating of plus 15.3 per 100. Because on defense, while that's been Houston's calling card all season, it's essentially tanked with that lineup to giving up 122.8 points per 100 possessions. But the offense has been absurd, so their net rating is also absurd. There's so many places to go with to go with this. This is absolutely a hot hand theory situation that they have in Houston. Geoff, lead us where we need to go to talk about this.
So I want to talk about the Amen Thompson part of it to start, because you kind of touched on it, putting him in the dunker spot. But I actually think another interesting thing they've done is they've given him the ball a little bit more. And so when Amen Thompson has the ball, now you have no one to help off of. It's just a screen setter and 4 and 3 spacers all the time. No matter who's setting the screen, you can't help off anybody. And Amen Thompson is a blur getting to the rim. He's a good passer already, a really good connective passer. So it's unsurprising to me that this has worked. It is surprising to me that you lose someone like Sengun and their offense is this good. I don't know what to make of it, honestly, because it's not like they had spacing issues when, like, they've remained, if they've gotten worse from a shooting perspective, because obviously Amen Thompson is the worst shooter in the league, and Sengun was at least somewhat of a pick and pop threat, you know? So in theory, their spacing should have got worse. What makes it interesting is Amen Thompson's positional fungibility and role fungibility on the offense. You know, he can run the pick and roll. You can put him in the dunker spot. He's already one of the best offensive rebounders in the league. I think that's just opened things up for the offense, not in a way that Sengun hasn't. It's just something worth considering if you're a Rockets fan or you're on the Rockets coaching staff. This versatility, or the way they've diversified their scheme, has helped them in the short term. I do think it's worth noting that it's only 150 minutes and their schedule has been pretty light in these 9 games. So if you look at the 9 games they've played that they've won in a row, I think only 8. I think Sengun got hurt like in the first or second win, and they've played 1 or 2 playoff teams. It's been pretty light. So I don't want to, dive head first and jump off the cliff, and make any really crazy claims. But I do think it is worthy of noting that Amen Thompson is already a very helpful player when he's the only non-shooter in the line. Like he's tenable, and not just tenable, very helpful. His strengths are emphasized when he's not the only non-shooter in the lineup.
Yeah, I largely agree with all that. I think this speaks to one really important theme for me, which is why I think there's so much value to having a stretch 5 or a spacing 5 is not just because the value they confer when you have a 5-out lineup. It's also, it allows you to play guys and get the most out of guys like an Amen Thompson, like these other guys at other positions that don't shoot as well, but offer a lot more that they're not necessarily always able to show, because the space will be cramped if they're out there, because you have the token 5, and the 5 is going to be kind of taking up space down low. And so, teams are going to be able to kind of deal with that lack of spacing. And when you put a 5 out there who can stretch it out, now you can get the most out of a guy like Amen Thompson. And I will say, Sengun does have just an overall on off of a minus 3.8, which is, one of the lower on the team, but Jabari Smith has a minus 8.3, which is the lowest on the team. So it's really interesting. I would say, so the first thing I would look at is, the first thing I want to look at is, like, part of this insane run has been because Jalen Green has been just crushing. Jalen Green, you sent me Jalen Green stats the other day. It's just been absurd over the last 10 games or so, or however many games since Sengun has been out. I think it started a little bit before Sengun actually went out as well. And I wanted to look at Green and Sengun's Wowie, they're with or without you. And basically that shows you not only how the team performs when the two are on together or not on together, or one is on and the other is off, but it also shows you how the individuals perform under both of those circumstances. And the WoWy actually says that Green is much more efficient when Sengun is on the court overall for the course of the season. So I don't think there's necessarily a connection in terms of like, wow, when Sengun is off, then Jalen Green gets to be himself and do all the things, and now he can make all the shots because he has all the space. I do think the space is valuable. I mean, everybody knows, who's ever listened to a minute of this podcast knows that I think that. But at the same time, yeah.
But why? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but why do you think there's more functional space right now? What can we like?
Does I think 3-point spacing is fundamentally different.
Does it say anything? But does this provide any worrying commentary to you about Sengun? Like, is this type of center actually not as helpful unless they're just super elite like Jokic? Like, is it possible that that's what we're seeing?
I think that to some extent, I think that the reason for that is because of what it doesn't allow you to do. So it doesn't allow you to play Amen Thompson and get the best out of Amen Thompson when you have a 5 like Sengun. That's the problem. So to me, in my opinion. So if you have Sengun and then you have 4 guys around Sengun who can shoot, then I think Sengun is totally viable and is an awesome player to have. And I think you can even, I wouldn't say like build around him, but he could be one of the pieces of your centerpieces of your team that you build around. I totally think that, but you just can't then also be trying to fit in guys like Amen Thompson who aren't going to be able to be maximized under that paradigm. So it's not that he's not viable. He just limits what your options would be, I guess is how I would think about it. I don't know.
So
what do you think?
You think without Sengun, there's been more flexibility?
Totally. More flexibility. I also think the spacing environment is different. So I didn't necessarily agree with you about like, just because Sengun can make, mid-range jump shots doesn't provide the same amount of space as if he was able to stretch it out to 3 consistently on a reasonable amount of volume. So I think that the fact that Jabari Smith Jr. is going to shoot threes and will knock down an open 3, you just can't just like leave him open out there. I think that the spacing environment is much better now than it was when Sengun was playing at the 5.
To be clear, I wasn't comparing Sengun to Smith. I was comparing him to Amen Thompson.
Oh, my bad. I
was saying if you have the same other 4 and it's just Sengun versus Amen Thompson, in theory they should have more space with the original lineup. But when you watch them, it feels like they have more functional space now. And I think that could be to the point you were just touching upon, which is, yeah, they have less shooting right now because Amen Thompson's a worse shooter than Sengun, but they have more variety, which could, in theory, open things up in a way that the stagnant functional spacing of their original starting lineup didn't.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful clarification. My bad. But yeah, so I think that the thing about Amen Thompson, or the thing about like a non-shooting wing, is that we're just so used to non-shooters being 5s and 4s at best. We're so used to it being like, here's our non-shooter. It's, the center. And when you have your non-shooter who's a wing, it's just like completely different. It's just like they have and Amen Thompson has a completely different skill set than any 5 would bring. And with his speed, his ability to cut, his athleticism, like just everything that he brings to that end of the court, even some of his passing, I just think like it's just such a different look to have a non-spacing wing or smaller player than it is to have a non-spacing 5, that I feel like, and this is what I was saying at the top, which is if you have a shooting 5, I don't think you necessarily have to have a 5 out. I think you could play some of these guys who can be awesome impact players, but they're just not able to get on the court because they just cramp it too much because of their lack of shooting. And there are a couple other guys like this. I want to be able to pull them out, but do you want to talk about that point at all for a second while I look to figure out who I'm talking about here?
Yeah, sure. You're asking me to filibuster. Don't say anything of substance.
I say the word filibuster,
but no. I think it's really interesting to dive into, like, if your non-shooter is a center, which everyone's used to, and we were talking about it in the previous episode with Precious Chua at power forward. I am curious how much of that's going on right now. How much of opponents not just, oh, this is a funky look, we haven't exactly solved it. Is this going to be exploitable in the near future? Our defense is going to be like, okay, this is how we attack Amen Thompson's weaknesses so that they are more exploitable than when Sengun's on the court with these 4 guys. I'll be watching very closely, these next 10 games as the schedule tightens up. They get OKC tomorrow, or should I say tomorrow or tonight? Because people are going to be listening to this tomorrow, but it is, you know what I'm saying? Like,
nah, I think you should say it for the audience for how they're interacting. At least that's what I try to do, but it's easy to forget. I don't know.
You're the pro, XJ. So the Rockets have a tough matchup against OKC tonight. That'll be an interesting game, especially given the way OKC plays, because
so interesting.
We talk about matchups all the time. The Thunder love playing small. Is it possible that this lineup is actually just a better lineup against OKC than their original starting lineup? Because OKC would just attack Sengun relentlessly if he was the starting 5. They would put him in pick and rolls. SGA is going to do his thing. I know that the Rockets have a couple guys that they can throw at SGA, bigger guys. Dylan Brooks loves that matchup. Well, guess what? Now they have Amen Thompson on the court. They're much less switchable. Jabari Smith, he can guard down. What is SGA going to have a harder time, even though there's less rim protection? Slightly less rim. Is there less rim protection? No, I don't know. Is there less rim protection? I don't even think there is. Amen Thompson's a good rim protector.
Oh yeah, in terms of the aggregate, yeah, actually, maybe it's similar. I mean, their defense hasn't been good with this.
Yeah, but it just feels like they're smaller, on defense. Even though Amen Thompson is obviously a better defender in a vacuum than Sengun is, I do feel like the Rockets could be tougher on that end of the court. And then what does OKC do? With this, they're basically facing a worse mirror version of their own offense, with Amen Thompson's kind of in the Lou Dort role. I know you're higher on Dort's shooting than I am. I still don't. Maybe it's like a bias because of his form or because of how he came into the league. I still, if I'm an opposing team, I'm pretty okay with getting beat by Lou Dort threes I
don't know, but that not this season. I mean, you would just lose then. I think
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it works like that. That's You gotta pick your poison. There's trade-offs to everything. I'd rather Lou Dort beat me than SGA beat me because I couldn't stay detached from Lou Dort. That's just me personally. I'm not saying it's wrong, or excuse me. I'm not saying I'm definitely right.
I guess my point would be like, then who do you? Why would you stay attached to anyone then? Like, if you're saying like I'd rather just Lou Dort just beat me, then why not just Jalen Wood? Like, why not J-Dub just beat you? What's the difference?
I buy Jalen Williams shooting more than I buy Lou Dort shooting.
Do you buy Chet Holmgren shooting?
Yeah, relative to his position, sure.
Do you buy Cason Wallace's shooting?
What is he shooting this season? I don't know that.
41%.
No, but he doesn't play big minutes. I'm talking about in the starting 5. I think Lou Dort is the person I would attack.
Okay, yeah, I guess to me it's just like, if we're willing to just like have a 40% 3-point shooter be the one to beat us, it's like that's just everyone. Then that's like we're fine with anyone shooting those shots. Then I guess
this is a really good team. It's relative to this really good team. There has to be something. You can't just give up everything. To me, the thing I'm willing to choose is Dort.
Hope they play Josh Giddey is what you.
Yeah.
Please play Josh Giddey more minutes is what you say.
Shout out the drop step. We went on that show a month ago, a couple weeks ago.
It was like a month ago, yeah, maybe more.
Yeah, he's a Giddey fan. I've been seeing on the timeline, like he was interacting with some Thunder fan, and they were like, "Yeah, we're the last 2 guys who believe in Josh Giddey's skill set." To be clear, not the person. He's not hyping up Josh Giddey, the person, but
important clarification.
Josh Giddey's basketball skill set. I found that interesting because first of all, I actually lean closer to him than I think you would. I think you're just like, yeah, he can't shoot. He just get him out of there.
No, actually, this is perfect because we're talking about this Rockets team. This Rockets team, let's say we take out Amen Thompson. Josh Giddey would fit perfectly here, in my opinion. Like, you can unlock Josh Giddey so well and all of his various skills, his unbelievable passing ability, his vision, his ability to finish around the rim, you know, with either hand, with kind of weird flip shots that he does. Not that he finishes particularly efficiently, but like, he has a skill set that you can completely unlock, to me. And you can't typically do that unless you, I mean, this is my theory, like, unless you have a spacing 5, in which case you have 4 out and a wing like Josh Giddey, 4 out and a wing like Amen Thompson, like Asar Thompson, you know, these guys that don't typically get to play in these like very nice spacing environments. When they do, they get to really, really show their skills. And so I think that that's such an incredible thing that Houston is doing, allowing that, and other teams could follow suit.
And to be clear, you need 4 out, and then you also need to not have SGA. Like,
yeah, well, yeah, of course, yeah.
That's people who are listening are going to be like, well, wait a second, OKC has 5 out too, so why can't Josh?
No,
and that's the
right.
difference.
Yeah.
Why would OKC spend time running the offense through Josh Giddey when they have one of the best players in the league? So that's the functional difference. I do think that's a nice segue into what Jalen Green's been doing. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but you know, I know that we view Jalen Green differently. I mean, I made a post that you thought was crazy a month ago, basically saying that, like, I was like, I think my tweet was like, who are you irrationally invested in that the rational side of you just is like, this makes no sense. And my answer was Jalen Green. This was before any of these games happened. And I was just like, I like watching him play. I think he's cool. I like the aesthetic game that he provides. I still believe in his overall ceiling. He's only 21 years old. And I remember you messaged me and you were like, what the fuck is this? Like, you were just like, or whatever. You were like, because we were so in line for the most part, and it just seemed out of nowhere to you. And so
I think, because you said you like watching him play. That's what it, like you said, like like watching him play. But basically that was the part that I was like, what are you talking about?
yeah, no, for sure. It's not like you were like down on the idea of his ceiling. You
right. Okay.
You were just like, I know he's not very good right now, and he wasn't
currently. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And you were like, so why would you like watching him play? And I was like, yeah, there's just something intangible about it. But I do think that we both would agree that he wasn't very good. And maybe I'm a little bit quicker to be like, oh, this is it. This is the leap than you would be. So what are your thoughts on his recent play and how it maybe affects your interpretation of what he can do going forward?
Yeah, I think that Jalen Green, long term, I think he has really good upside for sure. I think that what we've seen from Jalen Green, yes, I would not say I'm buying what we've seen from Jalen Green necessarily. I don't think it's like, and it's rare that this happens where there's a player who's like kind of like sputtering throughout their career earlier and then just like hits a point and then suddenly their trajectory goes straight up and it just never comes back. Like, that's it. They're just like, oh, here I am. I'm here now. I'm an awesome, not to say he's been playing like an all-star level player. I'm an all-star level guy and there's no going back. Like, after having like 2.5 years of like very shaky up and down play, I just don't think that that's like a trajectory that is common. And so I'm just unlikely to believe that this is just Jalen Green. He's here now. This is who he is moving forward. We can just forget about everything we've seen for the last 2.5 years. But I do think that this is showing a glimpse of what he could be, you know, like let's say he regresses a little bit moving forward this year and then maybe has an up and down next year and then proceeds, you know, in the long term, like with the kind of highs and lows, to become this kind of player. I could totally see that. I would not discount that. And I think that that's definitely viable. I mean, Jalen Green's had a plus offensive impact per EPM the last couple years, and that's without being efficient. Do you know how hard, and I know you know this, Geoff, you know how hard it is to be a positive impact offensive player being as inefficient as Jalen Green has been? Like, it's almost impossible because you're using possessions. You're saying, I'm going to use this possession for my team with a very inefficient shot. And to be able to do that at the rate that a Jalen Green does it, a 27 usage last year, a 27 usage this year, I'm going to commandeer possessions and make them be inefficient constantly and still have overall a positive impact on that's like, it's almost like a puzzle. It's like a paradox. Like, I don't even know how that's possible. But the fact that he's been able to do that means to me that there's something there that he's bringing to the court that is visceral, something that he's doing to bend defenses to the extent that when he's there, he's still having a positive impact despite like using all of these inefficient these possessions so inefficiently. So I believe in Jalen Green in terms of like potential long-term upside. I just don't think that what we've seen from him recently is like sustainable. And like, this is just, he's turned the corner and there's no going back, I guess is where I'm at.
He is shooting more threes recently, which is good. And it's really good because, man, like, look, I like that he wants to be a 3-level scorer. I like that I think he can be. He needs right now those mid-range. Like, he took this mid-range shot last night. That was legitimately one of the worst shots I've seen from any player all season. It was like they were up like 10.
Such an extreme view.
Dude, they were up like 10 with 2.5 minutes left or something. And he got the ball and drove and dribbled the court. He just started the possession. He got like a side pick and roll. And he shot this like 20-foot step back with his foot on the line with like 16 seconds left on the shot clock. And it just didn't come close. It was contested well. And I was just like, what are you doing, dude? Like, what? Why? I don't understand where that comes from. He needs to not shoot those as much. And I think that is such a natural way for his impact to immediately increase. Like the second those shots go down, because he hasn't been good from the mid-range ever. I think he could be. I think I told you last night, I really like his shot form. Obviously, he has a nice handle already. He has great athleticism. He can get to his spots. These are all really valuable things. But we've seen in other teams, there are other ways to improve in this area, in these areas, without practicing them in the games. Like, he shouldn't. And Ime Udoka is such a good coach, and he's known for being stickler, a hard ass. Like, I'm surprised that Jalen Green continues to have the freedom within the offense that he does shoot these shots, because they're so ineffective right now. And I don't see how they're helping the team. And if you just, maybe somebody who's more in the basketball know than I am would argue that the threat of these shots is making it easier for him to get to the rim than it otherwise would be. Like, if he just removed those shots from his shot diet completely and defenses started to pick up on the fact that he wasn't shooting those, they would be like, oh, he's inside the arc. We're just going to take away the basket now because he's not going to. But it doesn't really work like that. He would
wind up shooting less than 57% at the rim, which is the 26th percentile.
Right. League. Hey, it's better than Fred VanVleet. I do think he's going to be better at the rim. Like, not just better. I think he's going to be really good at the rim. I think he has the package to pause. I think he has the skill set to be really good at the rim. He's athletic. He can use both hands. And he can finish above the rim. He had this dunk last night that was bonkers. Like, he gets as many dunks, or he will be able to get as many dunks as any guard I've seen since like prime Russell Westbrook. Like he's that athletic and that gifted. So there's no reason he won't be better at the rim one day. I think I'm more with you, but I just tend to be more of an optimist, and he's only 21 years old. It's not crazy for this to just be a mini leap. Maybe it is crazy for it to be this extreme, but
I think it's this extreme, this sudden is where I'm coming from. It's just like like he was terrible in terms of his efficiency. And then suddenly one day now he is an efficiency god and makes a bunch of threes. And it's just like, for it to be that sudden doesn't feel realistic. That's where I'm coming from. Again, like, this is not to say anything about his ceiling, right? Like his ceiling, we could be in agreement about how high his ceiling could be, but just, it's like the getting there feels like it wouldn't happen this way.
Yeah, I do wonder if there's something to the fact that he's basically become, because Fred VanVleet's role hasn't changed at all. Like, if you watch the Rockets, VanVleet has pretty much remained stagnant, which is unique. Most teams, if they lose a guy who carries the usage and the load that Sengun does, there's usually a trickle down effect where other guys' usages and roles seem to rise. But Van Vliet's was already really high and it stayed the same. And they've basically replaced Sengun's role and usage through Jalen Green. I do wonder if there's something to the idea that more consistent reps and more consistent usage is behind the increased efficiency. Like he's just more comfortable right now and more in rhythm.
That's true. I think we have to look back because I feel like this kind of outburst started when Sengun was on the court, was still there, and also, like I said, his wowie, like he has performed very similarly with and without Sengun. So I don't know if that means that it's still not enough touches, because maybe that's like when he's playing with the bench unit. When Sengun is on the bench and he's playing with the bench unit, maybe that's not enough still of a rhythm. I'm not really sure. I would say it's tough to imagine that it's like Jalen Green is a player such that he needs more than like a 27 usage to have, the appropriate rhythm. And it's funny, like, I mean, I don't know. We think about RJ Barrett, who had a really high usage with the Knicks, but his usage has gone down since he's been in Toronto, but he's been a much better performer. And you could still argue that some of that is due to the rhythm that he's received, just by virtue of touching the ball, having the ball in his hands more, making more decisions, not just taking the shots. So, there's an argument that rhythm is created not just through like how much you shoot the ball, or how many times you use, or how often you use possessions, but just like how often you have the ball in your hands, get to dribble, get to attack, get to make decisions. I mean, we've seen the same thing with Obi Toppin, another Nick who went to another situation, and before, the Pacers made the Siakam trade, was having the best offensive year of his career, and his usage also went down. And another player who requires a lot of rhythm, or seems to require a lot of rhythm to have their best performances. So rhythm doesn't necessarily seem to be in virtue of getting the amount of shots or more shots, but it's more about like having the ball and being able to make decisions and feeling comfortable like that what you do is acceptable, as opposed to you made a mistake, you should have passed it because we needed to give it to Sengun, or we needed to give it to Julius Randle, or whoever the case may be.
Yeah, well, this is why the distinction you made, a month or two ago between usage and offensive load is so important, because usage doesn't properly capture role. You brought up RJ Barrett in Toronto. He definitely has his hands on the ball more consistently than he ever did in New York, and usage doesn't reflect that. But the types of touches he's getting are more active and more advantageous to a rhythm. And I do think that that's what we're seeing from Jalen Green right now. Like maybe the usage specifically hasn't skyrocketed, although I'd be surprised if the usage isn't way up too. I mean, he's shooting almost double the 3-point attempts he was in this stretch. It's insane. I just looked, there's a stretch. There's like a 20-game stretch from before Sengun got hurt where he was shooting fewer than 7 threes a game, and he was shooting 25% on those threes. And then during this stretch, he's shooting 11 threes per game, and he's shooting 40% on those threes.
Do you have the minutes per game that Green is playing? And I shouldn't ask you questions like that when I don't know if you have it up or not. But the reason I'm asking is just
36 minutes in this stretch. Because
he's at 31 on the season, so it has to be considerably less.
Yeah, 36 minutes per game in the good stretch, 30 minutes a game in the poor stretch.
Yeah. So that could be where it's coming from. Yeah.
But that's still extreme.
And so I don't think it can be completely explanatory. No. And that's why I still kind of go back to what I think, which is that, he'll see some regression from here. I don't think he's going to just like continue from this point. But maybe he'll, get back to this point again at some point next year. That's what I would hypothesize.
The good news, though, is that, in my opinion, you might disagree, I don't think Jalen Green needs to be a 40% three-point shooter to be a super valuable offensive player if he has the skill set he's purported to have.
Yeah, I do think he'll have to finish at the rim, and you made the case that he should be a good finisher, and I think that he can be a good finisher, but like we'll have to see it, right? Like I think he will have to finish it. I don't think you can be, a mid-30s three-point shooter and be like a mid-50s rim finisher. And then obviously he's not a good mid-range shooter, but even if he was, it's just like I don't think you can be that ineffective at, you know, 2 of those 3 levels and still be like, you know, near an all-star level player.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of early Devin Booker. Devin Booker was a lot better. So it's not perfectly analogous, but I think specifically related to him as a passer, which I think has to pop if he's going to reach his ceiling as an offensive engine. You just can't be only a sort of good scorer and that's it. You have to be able to create offense for your teammates. And I think that's interestingly enough, with how inefficient he's been, I think that's a bigger leap to take. But if you go back and watch some of Booker in his early days, he struggled with the same things. And then it just took pick and roll reps and learning coverages. There's no reason for me to believe that Jalen Green won't have the passes in his arsenal. It's the willing to deploy what's in your arsenal. And the only thing that can help you there is experience. And so I think that, you know, again, he's still really young. And whether or not what he's doing across these past 10 or so games is his true impact in this season, I'm not going to say it doesn't interest me, but I do think it's positive. It's positively correlated to him to being bullish on his ceiling. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's showing enough that's popping right now where it's like, if I was selling the stock a month ago, I'd at least I'd at least understand people who are like, man, he's showing these flashes. I still believe in him, you know?
Let me ask you this. The trade potential that was at least reportedly offered around and floated around for Houston, that would have entailed Mikal Bridges going to Houston for Jalen Green plus multiple first-round picks. Do you think that was absurd that you know, Brooklyn wouldn't take up on that?
Yeah, I think it's absurd that Brooklyn wouldn't do that. And I'm surprised. Or excuse me. I think it's absurd that Brooklyn wouldn't do it, and I get why Houston would do it. I think that was a rare deal that would have ended up kind of win-win. I'm still, unless you just think, you know, we talked about McCollum in New Orleans last week. I know Van Vliet isn't that old. I think he's 30. Right? Sound right? 29 or 30 years old. I think he's 30.
He's 30. So unless he just turned 30.
Yeah. So unless you just don't think Van Vliet is here for the long haul, I'm still a little skeptical about when Sengun is healthy, how Jalen Green gets the consistent offensive load that a guy like him needs. The good news is with Van Vliet, he's proven to be not a fully additive piece, but with his defense and apparently his shooting, apparently that's a thing. If Jalen Green makes a true leap where he needs to be the clear number one option or the 1A, 1B with Sengun, and Van Vliet has to be closer to Dillon Brooks, he can do that. Like he's such a good defender that all of a sudden that team makes a lot of sense, honestly. Like if Sengun and Jalen Green are the 1A, 1B and they continue to progress, and then you have Van Vliet, Dillon Brooks, and Jabari Smith Jr., 3 willing 3-point shooters who are all plus defenders already. From a synergistic standpoint, that 5 makes a lot of sense. And then, you know, we talked about this when we talked about the Thompson twins a couple months ago. I know that Amen Thompson isn't a good or viable shooter right now, but they just seem so invested and to love the game of basketball so much. I'm not going to say the sky's the limit because it would be truly unprecedented if a shooter this bad became like a good shooter. But if there's anything there for Amen Thompson, I think he's going to tap into it. I just think that he's going to find whatever is possible for him. So yes, this current 5 without Sengun isn't working, but I think that Amen Thompson's going to have to figure out how to work in lineups where he's not the only quote unquote non-shooter.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I totally could see that for moving forward for the future, like the way that you described some of the things that we have to see kind of be filled in, and things that need to work out for this to be a viable kind of core for this team to be a relative contender down the line. as far as at least like this season, right? Like, I know you're like a big picture, long-term thinker. My brain works the same way. Like, I'm constantly thinking of like, how can this team contend? What's the path to real championship contention? This season, they are in prime position to be able to get a play-in spot, and who knows what could happen. It seems like Sengun could come back potentially before the end of the season if they do make it into the playoffs. So what do you think is like the ceiling for this season's team, given what we've seen from Jalen Green, given the run that they've been on, given what they're doing to, like, decent to bad teams? What is kind of the ceiling for this team moving forward?
So I think it's unlikely they pass both Golden State and LA. So I think from a regular season standpoint, their ceiling is the 10 seed. That's not like dismissive to them. I just think there's too few games left, and it's hard to see both Golden State and LA falling off simultaneously to the point where Houston passes both of them. If Houston gets the 10 seed, I see no reason why they can't beat either Golden State or Los Angeles. Interestingly enough, I think that if LA and Golden State play, I think the Lakers will win. And I think that if Houston and Golden State play, Golden State will win. But I think that Houston would prefer to play the Lakers over the Warriors. If that makes sense. I kind of stumbled around that, but my point is basically, like, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I think Houston has a better chance of beating the Lakers than the Warriors. I think the Warriors are just a weirdly bad matchup for them. And I think that they match up against the Lakers better. So I don't see why they couldn't win the 10-9 game. And of course they'd be live in a single game against whoever loses the 7-8 game. So could they be the 8 seed? Sure. And then we talk about playing Denver. That's a little bit different story. Yeah. I wouldn't love that for them, but I don't love anybody playing Denver, to be honest.
So yeah, I'm in agreement. Obviously, to me, their absolutely max ceiling is making it into the playoffs as the 8 seed. Like that's where their season will end, and I'm sure Rockets fans would agree with that. I don't know. I just think it's like would be really, really good for the development of all of their young players if they were to be able to make it at least into that play-in and play a couple play-in games. I think that'd be really critical. So I'm curious to see how that goes. 9-1 in their last 10, and
to your point, I'm sorry to step in, but we've seen what you're talking about multiple times. In 2010, the Thunder made the playoffs a year early, and they took the Lakers to 6 games in the 8-1 seed, or 8-1 matchup, excuse me. The Pelicans made the Pelicans played the Nuggets in round 1. Wait, no. The Timberwolves, excuse me, played Anthony Edwards, and the Timberwolves played the Nuggets in round 1 last season. And they're the only team that I think they took them to 6, or maybe it was 5. It was either 5 or 6 games, but like with how the rest of the playoffs played out, they actually played Denver the toughest. And now here Minnesota is a year later, they're in the running for the number 1 seed. I know they've gone down since Towns got hurt, or they haven't gone down, excuse me. But you know what I'm saying? They've been a bit worse. My point is that there's a lot of functional value to a young team getting to play in this type of atmosphere, these types of games. So it would be really cool to see them, be the team that also, from a selfish perspective, I think the Warriors need to just pick a direction. And I feel like if the Warriors luck boxed a play-in spot and like beat the Lakers or found a way to get the 8th seed, I feel like they would just stay the course.
Like, we can run it back. We can do it one more time.
And as someone who
we still got it in us.
Yeah, just fucking choose a path, guys. Like, come on, quit doing this. So I do think it would be cool to see the Rockets be the team. And it's just fun to see new teams play in these games. The playoff matchups. I'm looking forward to seeing the Magic play a playoff series. That'll be fun to see what kind of buttons they press and how Paolo and Franz and Suggs do in their first ever playoff series. See if they're up to the challenge. Yeah, it would just be really cool to see this Rockets team get a chance to play a game like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that'd be really fun. I want to say I'm a little more bearish on the potential for that to happen, because I do think that, I'm the spacing guy. I love spacing. I love what they're doing in Houston, but I do think the offensive effectiveness is a little unsustainable. Not a little, it is completely unsustainable, but I do think that's going to come down to earth. And I think the defensive shortcomings are going to hurt them. Their calling card has been defense, unless they're able to kind of shore up that defense with this new lineup and this new kind of construction that they've been able to put together. I do think some of this is going to be, I don't know. I think some of this could kind of fall apart a little bit, but we'll see. I think that's just like where I'm at, just because I know the offense is not going to be able to perform it this way, for much longer. If we don't start to see a regression, we will very soon.
So the Warriors have 12 games left. 8 are on the road, 4 at home. Their one matchup against each other is in Houston. That's good for the Rockets. The Warriors are at Miami tonight and at Orlando tomorrow night. That's the Warriors are actually betting favorites in tonight's game because Butler has an illness. So, let's say the Warriors go 2-2 or 3-1 on this road trip. They're at Charlotte and at San Antonio. That's not the best for the Rockets, but then the Warriors have a stretch where they're versus Dallas, at Houston, at Dallas. That's good. They probably need to go. I don't know. The Rockets themselves have 11 games left. They probably need to go like 7-4 in their last 11 to have a chance to catch Golden State, maybe a little bit better. They've got a pretty tough schedule. They're at OKC, like we mentioned tonight. They've got Dallas. They've got at Minnesota. They've got Golden State. They've got Miami. They've got at Dallas, and they've got Orlando. So they definitely have a scheduled disadvantage against the Warriors. I would agree with you. I think the Warriors are probably decent favorites to get that 10 seed or the 9 seed, but you never know. Injuries happen. Maybe the Rockets will stay. It will be interesting regardless. And I think to put a bow on this, do you think that make the plan, not make the plan? Do you think that the Rockets are just fine staying the course, or do you expect them to head into this offseason with like, oh, we've got to make a splash type thing?
It's so interesting. I mean, my sense is that they want to push the envelope. My sense is that they don't want to kind of stay the course and wait for development. I think they want to do, which is funny. You told the Warriors to pick a direction. I think they want to do both. I think they want to develop their youth and try to do some damage in the Western Conference now. And so I'm not going to say like the Knicks. The Knicks haven't really done that. The Knicks got rid of their young players. So the Knicks clearly have picked a direction. So I think that, I think that Houston is live to do something big. I don't go for a guy like a Joel Embiid if that was ever a possibility. I think they're live to do something really big. So we'll see. I don't have a strong read on it, but that's kind of what I'm expecting.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Embiid would obviously surprise me, but I just mean like in general, them doing something wouldn't surprise me, especially after this last offseason. I mean, I'll say it. I thought the Van Vliet and Brooks signings were terrible. I was just like, what are you doing? This isn't going to help you do anything. How can this help? But one thing I discounted and was clearly wrong about is the infusion of culture and the value of that. And if it's helped, I mean, clearly it helped Sengun. Clearly it helped Jabari Smith. I told this story the last time we talked about this team, but that I loved how Jabari Smith this past summer was like, I was awful in my rookie season. How could I not play summer league? I love that type of self-awareness and humility. And, we joked about it. There was that time when Tari Eason tried to take the technical free throw in LA.
Yeah, that's the best.
And Van Vliet was just like, get the fuck out of here, dude. Like, what are you doing? This isn't going to fly anymore. Just things like that. I think I didn't know how to properly capture or value. And, behind this all is Ime Udoka, who's just clearly been a step up from, God, what was his name? I'm blanking on who their last coach was, but he was it Steven Silas? Is that who it was? I think, or is that whatever?
Sorry, Paul Silas's son, Steven Silas.
Yeah. Udoka has clearly brought an infusion of culture and like a care factor. And it's weird that, people like us, Knicks fans, would disregard that when it's what Thibodeau has done since 2020, 2021. Clearly the Rockets needed that, and that's been helpful. So, if I were a Rockets fan, I think I would be fine staying the course because, who knows, maybe from a record standpoint, they'll take a step back next season. Maybe they'll take a step forward. But as long as the continued development happens from Jabari Smith and from Sengun and Jalen Green and Amen Thompson, I mean, we haven't even mentioned Cam Whitmore or Tari Eason, who've already both shown flashes, and they have just such an overabundance of youth that it's like, okay, you would be fine with another season of this. But at the same time, if they think, okay, a couple of those guys are more ready right now, let's go and get someone and let's actually compete for, a playoffs, a non-play-in playoff spot or even home court advantage. That wouldn't surprise me either.
Yep, I think that's all well said. Really interesting. We'll definitely stay locked in with the Rockets, seeing what they do the rest of the season and this offseason and moving forward. So, good conversation. And I think that wraps up our Houston Rockets talk, unless you want to say any last words.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. So nobody, this, but not many people know this. My older brother passed away last year on April 1st. And today, when you're listening to this, would have been his birthday. And then just, the next couple of days is like the anniversary of when we found out that we lost him. I just wanted to tell a story. One of the last conversations I remember having with him, I told him that I played this really good golf round, and I'm at my best. I was like a scratch golfer, and I was like, oh man, it feels really good to play really well. And he was like, dude, you should just like take a year off from your life and try to go for it. And like, it's funny thinking back on that. Like I think about it quite often. Like that was such like I'm good at golf, but I have the self-awareness to realize that I'm not good enough to like go for it to be good enough on any meaningful level. But I always think about that because it is symbolic of the type of belief he had in me, the irrational belief. And recording this podcast has always been hard for me because he would have been such a fan of it. It's just everything that he was. He was the smartest person I ever met. He was just his ability to download information and just immediately have a thoughtful analysis on it was unrivaled to me. I can't even imagine what it was like to be inside his brain. It was just always working and always moving. And so I just wanted to say a word about him because it's been a year. It's been a really hard year. And I just want to thank people who have supported this podcast because I know he would have loved it. And, part of why I am doing it is for him. Just so I don't know where I'm going with that. Hug your loved ones, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm speechless. Incredibly strong words from you to be able to, to say that here. And I think that from everything you say, clearly your brother was like an amazing, incredible, unbelievable person. And I would disagree. The only thing I would disagree with you on is saying that he had an irrational belief in you. I think he had a rational belief in you. And so I'm just grateful that you had that support.
Yeah, I am too.